Happy Easter, everyone. How are you? Oh, you guys look good. You sound good. Some of you fellas even smell good. It's like you showered, like you're here to impress someone. Let's just be honest. If you're a guy and you are dressed to impress someone, could you just raise your hand? Could you actually just stand up? Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah. Ladies, look around. It's the best we got. Shameless gentlemen on Easter. I'm so glad. I did not think anyone would stand up. I am simultaneously so proud and disappointed in you guys. Well done. That was just a little hypothetical joke, and you just went for it. I have to be careful with that next service. Okay, cool. Well, hey, I don't know if you know this, but in 1956, it was a big year for the English language because a word was introduced. It was first seen in print in a journal called the American Imago in an article on accidental wordplay. So someone took these two words, the word hungry and the word angry, and they merged them together and made the word hangry. Yeah, hangry. And it took 62 long, grueling years. But in January of 2018, the word hangry finally got introduced officially into the Oxford English Dictionary. Way to go, hangry. It stuck it out. And so I want, round of applause for No, don't. You guys can't be trusted with my jokes. You'll start clapping for a word that is not important. Okay, so hangry, here's the definition. Hangry is a state of anger caused by a lack of food. May evoke negative change in emotional state. Translation, feed me or I'll kill you, is the translation. So how many of you have ever been hangry? Show of hands. Yeah. Some of you that aren't raising your hand, you're a liar. You might be hangry right now because church is like during the food hour and you're like, I ain't playing your games, man. I need some food right now. My wife told me about another word called prangry, which is pregnant, hungry, and angry, which is also just known as pregnancy. So I learned that from her recently. Well, I get hangry all the time. If you got to be hangry, Costco is the best place to be hangry because they got samples. You can send your kids to get samples. It's great. Works really well. I've been shopping many times and paid for an empty Snickers bar wrapper. And the lady's like, what happened to your Snickers bar? I'm like, it's in my stomach. I couldn't make it. Don't judge me, lady. I could have stole it, but I'm paying. I don't know if this is legal. Just charge me and act like this didn't happen, okay? But on Friday, I was really hangry, and I have 3 little kids, which means it takes us 2 hours to get anywhere. And so we were trying to get up here to the Good Friday service, and we're going to stop at a fast food restaurant and get some food real quick. And my wife asked me not to tell you with the fast food restaurant we stopped at because she was a little bit embarrassed and ashamed. So to honor her, I won't tell you the name of the restaurant. But we took a left off Stadium Way into a parking lot that has 2 drive-thrus. And right away, I'm looking at which drive-through lane to take, so I want to go as fast as possible. And I picked the one behind the little small cars, not the big trucks and vans, thinking there might be other people in there. So we picked the lane. I'm like, I know what my kids want. I know what I want. Let's go. And so it comes our turn. They're like, hey, how's it going? What could we get for you? And I'm like, 2 cheeseburgers, 2 fries, and a chicken sandwich. It's like, dunzo, I'm ready, efficient. And then my wife, she leans over and yells into the microphone, hey, how's it going today? And you're like, what are you doing, babe? And she's like, hey, real quick, could you tell me the difference between a McDouble and a quarter pounder? And this sweet employee at this restaurant that can't be named starts to talk about, she's like, well, a quarter pounder is like a different kind of meat. And it's like, a quarter of a pound of meat. And I think the buns may be different. Are the buns different? No, they're not. And I look at my wife and I'm like, what are you doing to me? Like, why? Why is this happening? And so she gets through that, and then she moves on to the McDouble. She's like, a McDouble's like the dollar cheeseburgers, but those kind of meats just put on top of each other. And I look at my wife, and I'm like, do you hate me? Did I hurt you? Are you punishing me? What's wrong? And so she's still not picking up on the cues. And so at the end of the whole spiel, my wife leans over again and asks the lady, hey, of those 2, which one is your favorite? Which one would you get? And I'm like, why are we married? I don't want to be married to you anymore. How do we figure out? There's cars passing by on the other lane. I'm so mad. I can't even bear it. Finally, I think my wife ordered both. I don't even know. I didn't even listen. We finally get our food and a couple of bites into my chicken sandwich. I'm like 2 bites in. And I'm like, oh God, what happened? Oh babe, I'm so sorry. I love you. I'm glad we're married. I was just so hungry and like, don't ever do that to me again. It was just food. My problem was food. I'm so sorry. I love you. Forgive me. I think every engaged couple in their premarital process should go through a time of being hangry together. Because, engaged couples are like, we love each other. And I'm like, you don't know that. You don't know. You never been hangry. You go 12 hours without food and then you talk about love. You don't know that. You watch your mouth, engaged couples. So listen, we've all had a time where we've been hangry and a couple bites into our food, it's like the world makes sense again. Like, oh, thank God, the world makes sense again. And listen, if you've been to an Easter service before or you've never been to Easter service before, it's very typical that we would give a sermon about the resurrection. We give a talk about Jesus raising from the dead. That's a big deal. And we usually do that, but we wanted to do something a little different today because we wanted to ask the question, like, is there a parallel here between being physically hungry and spiritually hungry? And we actually think there is. And we think that we're all walking the world spiritually hangry. I have to keep using that. I don't like it, but we're going to go with it, okay? We're walking the world spiritually hangry. We're irritable and we're frustrated, and this world doesn't make sense. And then Jesus comes along, and he speaks to that. And he speaks to that specifically in John chapter 6. So if you have a Bible, you can grab it and turn to John chapter 6. Otherwise, we're going to project it on the screen, or you can turn your phone on or whatever you use. But I want you to look at this with me so you can see I'm not making it up. But just to give you some context, Jesus has been doing ministry for about 2 years by the time we get to John chapter 6. He has turned water into wine. That's like his first miracle. I don't know what you think about Jesus, but his first miracle was like, hey, let's make this party a little bit better. And he didn't sin. That's impressive, I know. You're like, that may be the greatest miracle I've ever heard, Josh. It may be. But it happened. He also cleared the temple of tax collectors and robbers. He's taught a Pharisee, like this really religious guy. He told this guy about himself. He also, in the next chapter, teaches a promiscuous woman who's had multiple different men in her life, none of which are her husband. She's been with 6 different dudes, and Jesus talks to her, and so he's showing the scope of his ministry. He's healed on the Sabbath. He's told a guy to pick up his mat and walk, and here's what's happening. People are seeing Jesus do all this, and they're blown away. And they're like, man, this guy has power. Like, he's got power in his words. He's got power in his abilities. So they start following him. And in John chapter 6, there's 5,000 people gathered. And that's just men. They just count the men. So it may be 10,000 people gathered in total. And Jesus is teaching them. And they've been there all day. And the disciples come to Jesus and they're like, hey, all these people are really hungry. And they need some food. They're starting to get hangry. And Jesus is like, feed them. And they're like, we didn't bring any food. And he's like, does anyone have food? And this little kid brought a lunch. And he's got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And Jesus is like, hey, can I borrow that real quick? And he prays, blesses the food, and feeds everyone. Massive miracle. And the crowd is overwhelmed. They're like, Jesus, you need to be the king. You should be in charge. And there's this real big, momentum being built. So Jesus is like, that's not actually what I came to do. And so he goes across the lake on the other side. And he sends his disciples ahead. And just for fun, instead of riding on the boat, Jesus walks on water. Just a small miracle there. Walks on water to meet him on the other side. And then the next day, they come back and this crowd's still there. So you're like, Josh, why are you telling me all that? I'm telling you all that because the crowd that just ate bread from Jesus, they're still there the next day. And they have a conversation with Jesus about being satisfied on the deepest level. And in this conversation, Jesus exposes some things to this massive crowd. And at the end of the conversation, people walk away from Jesus, not towards Jesus. And the crowd goes from 5,000 down to 12. That's the kind of talk they have. He exposes some stuff that really gets to their satisfaction, and they don't like it. And so what happens in the story, and how can we learn from it? Well, let's look at verse 25 of John chapter 6. And it says this. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, Rabbi, when did you get here? They're like, how'd you get here? And he's like, I walked on water, but we don't have to talk about that. Okay, verse 26. Jesus answered, very truly I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Verse 27. Do not work for food that spoils, food that's going to go bad, food that gets gross, but work for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him, God the Father has placed his seal of approval. So the very first thing in this conversation, Jesus exposes something right out of the gate. Jesus exposes their deepest need. They're like, hey, what about the food you gave us? He's like, actually, your perceived need is not your real need. You think you need food, but what you really need is something that fills you on the deepest level. You're looking for food for this life. I'm talking about food that leads to eternal life. And the word he uses for life here is huge. In English, we have one word for life. You're like, hey man, how's life going? You're like, life's okay. One day and then the next day you're like, living my best life or whatever. Like, we have one word for life. In the Greek language, which the New Testament was written in, they have two words for life. The first word is bios. And in bios, that means physical life, material life. So you could say like, she spent her whole life savings, her whole bios on college, right? Oh, too soon on that joke. Like she spent, she's really giving her life to that project. She's giving her bios to that project. And then the next word is Zoe. You might know a girl named Zoe. That's what this is from, Zoe. Zoe means the life that transcends the physical. This is the eternal life. The Apostle Paul uses this in baptism. He says, you've been buried with Christ and raised to walk in a new Zoe, in a new kind of life. And so Jesus is having a conversation. He says, you guys are trying to find bios, but I'm trying to give you Zoe. So he says, you have a hunger in you that transcends your physical hunger. You have a Zoe hunger. You have a thirst in you that transcends your physical thirst. You have a Zoe thirst. And so right away, Jesus knows that they have a Zoe need that they are trying to fill with the bios solution. So in other words, this crowd is concerned with their stomach, and Jesus is concerned with their heart. And so he goes to them and he's like, hey, you guys have a problem that like a chicken sandwich isn't gonna fix. And they're like, well, where's this chicken sandwich from? Like, is it from Chick-fil-A? Because that's like a pretty solid chicken sandwich. He's like, I know the Chick-fil-A is better than that other restaurant that I didn't mention earlier, but even the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich can't fix what's going on here. Like, this is a deeper level kind of problem. And listen, let's be real. We're not foolish. You guys are educated college students. You have looked around. If you are intellectually honest, if you are emotionally honest, if you are spiritually honest, you realize this world is broken. It's not perfect. If you look in the mirror, if you watch the news, you see brokenness everywhere. So the question is not, do we agree something's wrong? Because we all agree something's wrong. The question is, do we agree that God knows what that thing is? Because humans have long been dedicated to figuring out what is going on, this need inside of us. Some have called it the existential angst. Some have called it spiritual hunger. Some have called it the God-shaped hole. But as long as people have been writing about it, there's an internal void that bothers us. And it bothers us so much, we think, I'm going to ignore it, I'm going to numb it, I'm going to fill it, but I got to do something with it because we all know we have a problem and we're all looking for Zoe, but we don't know how to find it. That's why the majority of people you meet would say they're spiritual. And they don't know what that means. They just mean, I'm looking for Zoe, I'm just not sure how to communicate that, so I'm going to call it spiritual. And what spiritual really means is I get to be in charge with what I believe, and I get to figure out what's true and what's not true, and what's true for me is the only thing that really matters. But what they're really saying is there's got to be more to this life, and I don't know what it is, and I have an internal angst inside of me, and I can't figure it out. So thanks for asking. I'll just say I'm spiritual. Could you please leave me alone now? And you're like, oh, cool, sorry. Touched a little existential nerve there, spiritual person. So there's something going on here that we're all looking for, and many of us try to figure it out in many different ways. Oftentimes we try to find the filling of our souls by a better version of ourselves maybe. Some of us would find it in someone else. Some of us would find it in stuff like material possessions. Some of us may find it in addictions, and some of us may find it in religion and spirituality. And all of those things are asking major questions that we're trying to answer. So let's walk through this. Many of us say, I have an internal void. I'm going to fill it by being a better version of myself so that I can answer the question, do I matter? And here's how that goes. You go, I'm going to wake up earlier. I'm going to be more productive. I'm going to get more social media followers. I'm going to lose that weight. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to be the best version of myself that I can be. And when I get to be the best version of myself, that's when I'll be satisfied. And you go, no, that's food that spoils. Like, I don't know if you know this about gravity, but like it wins. Like everything's going down. You guys know that? Like you can work really hard to keep it up, but it's going down. Can we just stop right there? Like you tracking? South, not north. Everything. Okay, you got it. Not that funny. Cool. Don't say that next service. Cool. Better version of myself. Do I matter? And then if that's not enough, some of you go this route where you go, I'm going to be fulfilled by someone else. Asking the question, am I loved? And so what happens is you're walking around the world going, I'm a half a person. I need to be completed by someone else. I love doing wedding ceremonies because I get to say to, especially if they're followers of Jesus getting married, I get to say these people were complete way before they came down here to get married. They were completed by Christ. And so many people look at their spouse or their boyfriend or their girlfriend to complete them, and you have no idea how much pressure that puts on them and how crushing that is to them. And if you've ever dated anyone and broken up, you know it doesn't work. But yet we try it over and over. Or others of us go to stuff and they ask the question, do I measure up? And we start comparing ourselves to others and thinking if we had more stuff, maybe we'd do better with others. And we have this little thing we hold in our hand. It's called a cell phone. And we just scroll at night and we're like, oh man, I've never eaten dinner at the top of the Space Needle. Oh, I've never gone to that ski resort. I didn't go to that party. I've never wore that clothes. Oh, I really wish Pullman had a Target. And that would be really God, I can't even shop at, is there a Nordstrom's within 100 miles of here? God, Old Navy again? Okay, and you just are I just need to buy more stuff. And at the end of the day, buying more stuff's not going to get you there. It's not going to satisfy. It all goes away. And so then maybe you go to addictions where you're like, can I just make this stuff go away? And so many of us are addicted to substances, or we're addicted to food, or we're addicted to video games, or we're addicted to work, ultimately saying, I don't want to think about that other stuff. I just got to get through this life trying to figure things out. Or then lastly, maybe some of us run to religion and spirituality saying, can I save myself? Can I participate in enough spiritual activity to fix what's wrong with me? It's like we're trying to make a good grade on a test that was never given. And it's exhausting, and over it goes. And here comes Jesus saying, if you find your life in things that perish, you will never be satisfied. Because all of those things are going to wear off. They're going to fade because they're temporary. They're not eternal. They're bios, not zoe. It's like my kids every single night of last summer. I try to put my kids to bed and they're like, Dad, I'm so hungry. I can't go to bed hungry. And I'm like, I know you're hungry because you ate watermelon and Skittles today. That's all you ate. I think all you drank was popsicle juice. Of course you're hungry. Yes, I'm a terrible dad for allowing that, but nonetheless, that's what happened. And you're hungry. And that's what it's going to be like because you have eaten nothing. And many of us go to bed and we're like, we're so hungry. We're so hungry spiritually. It's like, yeah, because you didn't eat anything today. And you just scrolled on your phone finding nothing. You just sowed discontentment in your soul. And you know there's something wrong. You don't know how to fix it. You see this in celebrities and athletes. In 2001, Trent Dilfer was the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens, and they won the Super Bowl 34-7, blew out the Giants in the Super Bowl. And he sat alone in the locker room after the game, and he said, it was the loneliest moment of my entire life. There's an artist named Vince Staples. In his album, Prima Donna, he has a song called Smile. And he says this, and I quote, I'm quoting his lyrics, okay? I know that money come and go, so money not my motive no mo. That's just quoting the lyric, okay? Don't judge me. N-O-M-O, how would you pronounce that? No mo. I've made enough to know I'll never make enough for my soul. I've made enough to know I'll never make enough for my soul. Tom Brady, after he had won his third Super Bowl, was in an interview with 60 Minutes. And they asked him, what did you feel after the confetti was falling? And he said, I looked up and thought, there's got to be more than this. There's got to be more than this. Jim Carrey famously said, I wish everyone could experience being rich and famous so they'd see that it wasn't the answer to anything. One philosopher said, the loneliest moment in your life is when you have just experienced that which you thought would deliver the ultimate, and it has just let you down. There's a mountain of celebrities and public figures speaking to the fact that achieving status or reaching the top doesn't deliver wholeness. Why? Because you're hungry for something deeper. You're hungry for a bread that can actually fill. And then Jesus comes along and he says this. Jesus says, I know you need a Zoe solution for your Zoe problem. You have a Zoe solution for your Zoe need. None of those things I mentioned earlier are bad. If we had a Target in Pullman, that would not be bad. If I got in better shape, that would not be bad. If I was a better father, better husband, none of those things are bad, but none of them can be ultimate because all of them are going to overpromise and underdeliver. And by the way, if you perform and you achieve to try to find your fulfillment, listen to me, it'll never lead to what you think. It's just going to lead to exhaustion and bitterness and ultimately death. And Jesus knows that. So he exposes our deepest need, being Zoe, not bios. And the next thing, he exposes their motivation in verse 30. So they asked him, what sign then will you give to us that we may see it and believe you? What are you going to do? In verse 31, our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. This is the Old Testament story we'll talk about in just a second. Verse 32, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, it was not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it was my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. So this massive crowd is like, hey, since we're talking about bread, Jesus, we got to talk about the massive bread story in the Old Testament. And it comes out of Exodus chapter 16, when all of God's people had been set free from the slavery they were under with Pharaoh. They walked through the Red Sea. We're talking millions of people walk through the Red Sea. Red Sea falls down on the Egyptians. God's people are free. Praise God, they're free. They're supposed to go to the promised land. Instead, they disobey God, and he's like, okay, for a whole generation, you can't go to the promised land. And so he makes them wander in the wilderness for 40 years. But he loves his people, so he provides for his people. And catch this, every day for 40 years, bread fell from heaven to feed the people in the wilderness. Crazy story. Bread fell from heaven, and they would pick it up just enough for one day, every day. And then on Friday, it would fall enough for 2 days so that on Saturday, the Sabbath, they wouldn't have to work. And they did that for 40 years, and they bring up this story. And they go, hey, do you remember when Moses did that? And Jesus goes, that wasn't Moses. That's not a story about Moses. That's a story about God sending bread from heaven to take care of you. And you're making that story about the gift and not about the giver. And if you have eyes to see the symbolism here, Jesus is looking at them and saying, hey, I know another story about God sending down bread from heaven that you're supposed to come to every day to find your sustenance. And right now, I'm offering you this bread. I know what you need, and I'm here to fix it. I am now the bread that has come down from heaven. Do you catch that? In verse 34, it says, sir, they said, always give us this bread. He's like, oh gosh, you're still not getting it. They don't say to him, oh, Jesus, you're the bread. Okay, how about you stay with us? Instead, they say, sir, that bread you're talking about, we would like to always have that bread. And he exposes their motivation. So real talk, listen. Jesus looks at these people and he says, you are not here to be spiritually satisfied. Let's be honest. You're here to be physically satisfied. He said, let's be real. You're not here for Zoe. You're here for bios. You're not here for me, Jesus says. You're here for the benefits you get from me. You're not here for the relationship you get with me. You want more miracles. You want more goodies. You're not here for the satisfaction I offer. You're here for the stuff I offer. And listen, Resonate, if any of us are in this for the benefits of Christianity, but not the Christ of Christianity, then you'll miss the beauty of Christianity. Because the beauty of Christianity is the relationship you have with the giver, not the relationship you have to the gifts. Because when you have a relationship with the giver, it brings change. It transforms you. When you have a relationship to the gifts, you just want more gifts, but the giver can transform and change because the relationship brings closeness and intimacy and transformation. I've seen Justin Timberlake in concert before. I watched his Netflix special. I dyed my hair like him when he was in NSYNC. I have tried to conform to his likeness, but I have no relationship with Justin Timberlake yet. Have faith, holding out. He and my wife have the same birthday, actually. Like they were born literally on the same day. Amy Martin, Justin Timberlake. How cool is that? It's a great day for planet Earth. Great day. Also a great day for my life. JT and Amy. But I don't know him. I don't know him. And so he hasn't changed me. It hasn't, because I don't have that relationship with him. But my parents have changed me. My wife has changed me. My friends have changed me. Our church staff has changed me. Why? Because I have a relationship to them. And Jesus is saying, I've come here to be the giver of something. And it's actually not the gift that we should be looking for, but rather the relationship to the giver. So to say it another way, the gift is the giver. The gift is the giver. And Jesus says, the giver is me. So he loves him enough to say, hey, listen, I'm going to expose your deepest need, which is Zoe, not bios. And I'm going to expose your motivation. Many of you are here for the gifts. You're not here for me. And I love you enough to talk about that. And then lastly, Jesus exposes their allegiance. And this is where it gets real. This is where it gets real. Because they looked at him and they said, sir, give us this bread always. And Jesus responds in verse 35. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. Wow. Bold. No other religious leader would ever say something like that. They would say, I know the way to God. I know how to get there. I can give you some tips and some tricks. And Jesus says, no. Come to me. I am the bread. If you are hungry, come to me. If you are thirsty, come to me. Believe in me and your thirst will go away. Believe in me and your hunger will go away. And this is the absolute turning point for this crowd. This is the line in the sand moment. This is a declaration that Jesus puts out that must be dealt with. And before we were kind of talking around it, but now here it is. Jesus looks at the crowd and says, I have not come to bring bread. I have come to be bread. I have not come to improve your life. I have come to be your life. And that is massive. And he essentially says, your spiritual hunger will never be satisfied outside of me. He says, I'm what you need. I'm what you've been looking for. I am the bread that has come down from heaven. And to have me is to have everything. And you go, Josh, why is this such a big deal? Because that insinuates something significant. If Jesus says he is the only place to find satisfaction, he's the only place to find Zoe, then what he is also saying is massive. That whatever it is you are looking to for Zoe, whatever it is you're looking to for satisfaction, whatever it is you're looking to for fulfillment, must now be turned away from. This is repentance language. I must look at what I was worshiping. I must look at what was on the throne of my life, and I must turn away from it and look at Jesus and see that he is actually the one that satisfied. And the crowd sees this and they go, no, that is not what we signed up for. We cannot do that. Jesus, we would like to keep our bread, the thing that we're doing, and we would like to add you to it. Jesus, we would like to make all the decisions in our life, and we'd like to overlay you on top of it. Jesus, at the end of the day, my goal in life is to ultimately be identified with you. I'd like to identify with you. Jesus, but here's the rules. I would not like to be inconvenienced by you. I do not want you to be the authority over my life. I get to remain the authority of my life. And here's going to be the thing. You're going to give stuff to me, and you're going to do things that I like, and you're not going to go meddling in my life. You're not going to go meddling in my sexuality. You're not going to go meddling in my spirituality. You're not going to go meddling in my money. You're going to leave all that stuff alone, and you're going to do what I want you to do. And Jesus says that's not actually how this works. Because if you want that kind of relationship, that's not the relationship I'm asking, because that's never going to satisfy. That's never going to get you there. So Jesus draws the line and says, your allegiance must be completely to me, only to me, always to me. And they turn from him. And let me remind us, this is in the third year of his ministry. So many of these people have been following him for multiple years, and they turn away from him. This is a heartbreaking moment. Because at the end of the day, the crowd wanted Jesus to be a politician or a healer or a teacher or a king or whatever they wanted. And many of them had been impressed by Jesus, maybe even moved. Like when the music played, they would cry. They had been affected by Jesus. But at the end of the day, they missed him. They stood in front of Zoe and missed it. And they walk away. And listen, this, if we're honest, this may be where some of us are. Maybe Jesus comes to us and he says, I am the bread of life. Come to me, believe in me, and hunger no more and thirst no more. And we hear that declaration. And many of us look at the thing we're holding in our hands and we say, no thanks, Jesus. I have all that I need right here. In my job, my relationships, my security, my money, my dreams, my addiction, my self-help plan, my religion, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my spirituality, my thing. And if you're saying that I have to take this off of the throne and let you be on the throne of my life, then I am not interested in that. And that's what happens to many of us. And if that's you, let me plead with you. You came to Easter, let me plead with you. The things that you are clinging to, the things that you so desperately can't let go of, those things will never satisfy. They will only demand more from you. They will ultimately exhaust you. They will make you bitter, and they will lead you to despair. And then 6 months later, you'll try a new thing, and it'll do it all over again. And a year later, you'll try a new thing, because it's all food that spoils. It's all things that perish, and they will always ask more of you. They will always underperform for you. They will ultimately break you. They will never be broken for you. They will never sacrifice for you. They will only ask that you sacrifice for them. So why in the world does Jesus deserve to be put on the throne? Why is he worthy of that? How could he possibly make such a claim? Well, listen, I submit to you, Jesus can make such a claim because Jesus Christ is the only bread that will break for you. He's the only bread. Of all the breads out there that will break for you, he proved this when he lived a perfect life for you. When he went to the cross in our place, he was put in a grave in our place. That was our grave. That was what we deserved. And then he rose from the dead, victorious over death, proving to the world that he's not a liar, that he is the bread that came down from heaven, proving to the world that he could be trusted, and that now death is not the end of the story, but rather death is a doorway to more of the life we've already given now. And he comes to us, Jesus comes to us, and he finds us starving to death with a stomach full of substitutes. All we've been eating is watermelon and Skittles, and we're hungry. And he comes to us, and he says, you've got to stop this perpetual cycle of eating only to become hungry again, drinking only to become thirsty again. You're never going to find life in that. And so Jesus comes to us, and he says, I know how to fix that. I know how to stop the hunger. I know how to satisfy the thirst. Come to me, believe in me, and be satisfied. And just like when we eat food, when we are physically hungry, after a few bites of that food, the world starts to make sense again. In the same way, when we are spiritually hungry and we go to Christ, after a few bites of the grace he offers and the forgiveness he offers, the world starts to make sense again. And that's what he is offering in John chapter 6, and they miss it. They say, this teaching is too hard. I cannot accept it. He loved the people enough to tell them the truth, and they walked away. Down in verse 66 of this chapter, it says this: from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. And then Jesus looks at the 12 and says, you don't want to leave me too, do you? Jesus asked the 12. And then Simon Peter, like the leader of the disciples, he answered, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe, and we know that you are the Holy One of God. So why would we choose to talk about this on Easter? Why would this be the passage? Well, our motivation is the same motivation Jesus had in John chapter 6 when he told the crowd the truth. We love you. And we love you enough to tell you that this is the most significant truth in the whole world. And it was proven by a resurrection. And this is the thing that you're actually hungry for, and this is the thing that fixes that. And we love you enough to tell you that. In college, we had to study these definitions for evangelism. Evangelism is when someone shares Jesus with someone else. And the one definition I remember was by a guy named D.T. Niles. And D.T. Niles says this: evangelism is simply one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. So you go, Josh, why are you sharing this on Easter? Because I'm one beggar telling another beggar, hey, I know where bread is. I know the thing that'll satisfy you. I know the thing that can fix the angst inside of you. And when Jesus shared this with the crowd, let's be honest, people left. They went down from 5,000 down to 12. It is not our hope that would happen at Resonate Church. It'd be like, oh, we're out, man. 12 people show up next week. That is not the goal of this. But the goal of this is to say, we love you. And we want to share that with you. And your response to Jesus claiming to be the bread of life will show us what's going on in your heart. Because in the story, we see what's going on in the hearts of these people. Because false belief, when they hear the words of Jesus saying, I'm the bread of life, false belief says, those words are too hard, I can't listen to them. But true belief says, where else would I go? Jesus, you have the words of life. False belief is hardened by the words of Jesus, and it bails when the line is drawn. But true belief is softened by the words of Jesus. It is sustained by the words of Jesus. They're drawn to the words of Jesus. So what's happening in your heart right now is evidence of what this text is actually doing. When I tell you Jesus is the bread of life, what happens in your heart? Are you hardened by that? Are you softened by that? Are you moved by that? Are you withdrawn from that? Because true belief looks at Jesus and says, there's nowhere else I want to go. As the great preacher Martin Lloyd-Jones said, anyone who has any conceivable alternative to Jesus Christ is not a Christian. There's no alternative to him. He's the only place we go. And listen, our church has been around Pullman for around 12 years. And in 12 years, we have been heartbroken by watching people walk away because the bread in their hands is actually what they were after, not the bread of life that Jesus offers. And listen, if you really start coming around our church, it will not be long before the authority of Jesus collides with the strongly held belief that you're clinging to. And in that moment, many people have said, Jesus, I cannot give that to you. And they have chosen the sweetness of sin, temporary sweetness of sin over the promise of the eternal bread of life that satisfies. And they walk away from the only bread that will break for them. And they walk away from Zoe, and they miss life completely. They miss satisfaction. They miss the promised land. They remain in the wilderness of sin without ever seeing the gift of God in their midst. So listen, I don't know how you got here, but I know here's the offer. Do you want to be satisfied? Do you want the angst to go away? Do you want the void to be filled? Then come to Jesus. Believe in Jesus. He is the only thing that satisfies. He is the bread of life. And listen, the scariest thing about this entire passage, the scariest thing that the Bible actually teaches to me, is that the Bible teaches that outside of Jesus Christ, there is existence, but there is no such thing as life. So many of us are walking around the world existing and missing out on life. But that's the teaching of the Bible, that you are existing without Christ, but you do not have life. So come to him to have life now. Come to him to have life eternal. That's what the resurrection is all about, proving this claim is true. And now we can feast at the table of grace. We can drink deeply the cup of forgiveness, and we can enjoy him now and enjoy him forever. And so again, just as when you are physically hungry, you need a couple of bites of food before the world makes sense. Resonate Church, you are spiritually hungry. And you need some bites of food so the world can make sense. If you want to be healed of your spiritual hunger, it's going to take a couple of bites of bread before it makes sense. So from one beggar to another, I know where to find bread. And I invite you to come to him. Believe in him for life now and for life eternal.